Hey there, cats and kittens, and thanks for tuning in to a special episode of the Monkey Boy Presents, where I am giving you my wish list of some characters that I wish had been included as figures in the DC Comics superhero collection by Eaglemoss. This is the first of 3 wish lists. Initially, I was going to do one top 10 of the heroes and villains I wanted to see and a top 5 special editions, but the list just kept getting longer and longer, so I decided instead to do 3 videos: a top 10 supervillains, which is what you're watching now, a top 10 superheroes, which will be next, and a top 10 special editions. And they're even a little bit longer than that, at least the heroes and villains ones are, because the lists were so long I decided to include some honorable mentions that were probably long shots to begin with, but that still I think would have been pretty cool to have included in this collection. They're in order of how I would have liked to have seen them, like from least important to most important being my number 1 pick, least being number 10, and then the honorable mentions are just sort of pipe dreams, I guess, although I will say some of the honorable mentions and even some of the figures in all 3 of these lists have since gone on to be produced as part of the DC Chess collection. So if there's a character you're really into that I mentioned here, you might have the opportunity to pick it up as part of the Chess collection, and who knows, maybe I'll cover some of those figures since I want them and don't have them, and they wouldn't be redundant, which is one of the reasons I'm not doing the Chess collection, because it'd just be sort of redundant for me to do so. Anyway, without further ado and me blathering on anymore, let's take a look first at the honorable mentions for villains I wish had been included in this line, followed by the top 10 supervillains that I wish had been included in the DC Comics superhero collection by Eaglemoss. Honorable mentions. The Calculator, also known as Noah Cutler, started out as a Batman villain, but has since become one of the primary nemeses of the Birds of Prey. He is an information broker to the criminal underworld of the DC Universe. Not just Gotham City, he's spread out to all of the evildoers in the DCU. He's basically the exact opposite of Barbara Gordon as Oracle. Maxwell Lord started out as an ally to the Justice League Europe, actually funding them. He's a self-made billionaire, basically, but eventually it turns out he's a bad guy, manipulating them, manipulating a lot of heroes, as a matter of fact. He's ultimately killed by Wonder Woman when she snaps his neck, but has since been resurrected after the Blackest Night event, and now continues to sort of harass the heroes in the DCU. An interesting character, but that's why he's just an honorable mention. He's not necessarily one of my favorite. The Parademons are Darkseid, the ruler of Apocalypse's first wave of death, basically. They swarm in, there's hundreds of thousands of them, they're mindless beasts that are just there to destroy everything in their path. There's not one of them, there are hundreds of thousands of them. Cool designs, would have been a neat figure, but I can see why they didn't include him, because there's not just one, there are thousands. Also glimpsed in Batman v Superman, for those of you who saw that film. Granny Goodness, one of the nastiest ladies in all of the DCU. She works for Darkseid on the planet Apocalypse. She's in charge of brainwashing the populace when they're still children into being mindless little slaves for Darkseid who never question their orders. She also is in charge of his elite guard known as the Female Furies. A very obscure character, yet another reason why she's only on my honorable mentions. I can see why she wasn't produced either. Xerxes, one of Wonder Woman's chief villains, although she's not as well known as some of the other Wonder Woman villains, which is why she's only on the honorable mentions list. I just think it would have been nice to include more Wonder Woman nemesis. She's a sorceress, she can alter minds, she's nearly immortal, she's sexy and deadly, and it would have been cool, but she doesn't make my top 10, barely. Number 10. The Weather Wizard would have been a nice addition because it's another Flash villain, and I really wanted more of the Flash's Rogues Gallery represented in this collection. I like his colors, I like his costume, I like his wand, which is what he initially used in order to control the weather. It actually was a scientific invention that it could control weather patterns, basically. He could create tornadoes, cyclones, hurricanes, you name it. Weather Wizard could do it. He now doesn't need to use the wand, but whatever. It's a cool character who I wish had been included in the series. Number 9. Desaad is Darkseid's chief torturer on the planet Apocalypse, a toady little guy who loves to inflict pain. His name is actually derived from the Marquis Desaad. That's where the creators of the New Gods comic got the idea for him. He would have been neat to include because I wish there had been more New Gods, especially evil New Gods, since the only one we got was Darkseid. It would have been nice to have his little right-hand toady standing next to him on the shelf. Number 8. Killer Frost is an interesting character. There have been multiple interpretations of the character, not just look-wise, but also the women that have been Killer Frost. There have been multiple women to take on the mantle. She's primarily, though, a Firestorm villainess, which is why I think it would have been cool to include her, give Firestorm a bad guy. Most of the other characters had some sort of representation, with a few exceptions, but that's why I would have included her, a really dynamic-looking character that they had a lot of different designs to base a figure off of. Number 7. Now, Livewire is interesting because, much in the same way that Harley Quinn was created for Batman the Animated Series and adapted into the comic books, Livewire was created for Superman the Animated Series and was later adapted into the comic books because she proved to be so popular. She's a dynamic character with interesting powers, the whole lightning powers, and she herself is sort of like living electricity. It would have been cool to have her posing with that crazy electric hair of hers and maybe her hands glowing or sparking with electricity. That would have been pretty cool to have on the shelf. I would have liked it. Number 6. Another awesome Aquaman villain who I can't believe wasn't included in the collection. Ocean Master is actually Aquaman's half-brother, who feels he should be the true ruler of Atlantis and has stopped at nothing to take the throne from Aquaman on numerous occasions. Love his look, love the trident, love the cape. It would have been nice to have him alongside Black Manta because the two have teamed up on tons of occasions, too many to name. Just a great character that I feel I'm still stunned wasn't part of this collection. Number 5. Now, who doesn't know General Zod, one of Superman's greatest foes, I think one of his most famous as well, possibly next to Lex Luthor and maybe Doomsday? I mean, he's been in the movies all the way back since Superman 2, and more recently Man of Steel, which I personally enjoyed. A cool character with a great look, very militaristic. It would have been neat to have him facing down Superman on your shelf if you wanted to, maybe even with his eyes glowing red with that energy that they use for their heat vision. Pretty cool looking figure with multiple takes too, tons of different ways you could have presented him. Another character that I'm really surprised wasn't included in this collection. Number 4. Another one of the founding members of the Flash's Rogues Gallery, Heatwave, should have been in this line. You can't have Killer Frost without Heatwave as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they even did it on the TV show. Oh, the classic one and the new TV show. Heck, they've even spun off onto that Legends of Tomorrow show. That's how influential they are. He could have been great in that yellow and white suit of his with both of his flame guns. Maybe even have one of them shooting some flame off of the end of it. That would have been a pretty cool thing to have. I'm really, again, surprised that this character wasn't a part of this series. Number 3. For those of you who don't know Shadow Thief, he is primarily one of Hawkman's villains, which I would have liked to have seen a Hawkman villain represented. I can't help it, especially one as unique as the Shadow Thief. He has the ability to wear this belt, which enables him to shift into a two-dimensional, intangible shadow form. He can move quickly across surfaces and materials, silently as well. He's impervious to almost any physical contact or attack. He's just a unique character that they could have done a lot with in figure form. I mean, he can make his fingers into blades, basically, or axes, or whatever. He can manipulate his form and be very deadly. He would have been a great, great figure to have on the shelf. Number 2. Now, obviously, I like the more obscure villains and heroes, which is why Shadow Thief is on here, but Enchantress, I feel, is also one of the more obscure ones, although that's probably going to change with the Suicide Squad coming out here soon. She is an extremely powerful sorceress who has the ability to manipulate magical energy through a number of different ways, from healing to teleportation. She can levitate objects, she can walk through walls. Some would argue that she's more of an anti-hero than a villain, but that could apply to a number of the different villains that have been included in this collection already, and I love her look. I think she could have been very dynamic, maybe have a ball of glowing energy on one of her hands like she's casting a spell, or even posing that way at the very least. She could have been a very cool figure, and yet another female villainess. Number 1. The Trickster is my number 1 choice for this line. One of the Flash's most famous villains. He's been represented on the television series, both the classic and the new, Mark Hamill most notably playing him on the old series and the new series. He's sort of the Flash's Joker, really. A little bit less deadly, I suppose you could argue, but a cool figure nonetheless. Very colorful outfit, would have looked really neat on the shelf, and there have been a couple different interpretations of the character, so they could have gone with the classic or the more modern look, because he was around in the old comic books. This was before New 52, so I'd be okay with that. I really would have liked to see him included, especially since he's one of the Flash's number 1 rogues, and there just weren't enough of his rogues gallery. I am still really surprised he wasn't in this collection, and he's my number 1 pick. If they could do one more villain in the series, it should be Trickster. So there you have it, everyone, my top 10 supervillains I wish had been included in the DC Comics superhero collection by Eaglemoss. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below, and please like the video if you did enjoy it. I'd be curious to see if any figures or characters you would have liked to have seen that I didn't mention. Also, if you do want to pick up some of these characters, they are out there, 4 of them as a matter of fact. Desaad was included in the Chess Collection series, although it is the newer interpretation of Desaad, so he's a little more monstrous. You also have Killer Frost in her latest incarnation, which honestly I have to admit looks pretty cool. Also, Ocean Master, who looks just as he did in the classics as far as I'm concerned. It's a great interpretation. And General Zod. He might stand out a little bit more in your collection because he's on that taller base since he's a king in the Chess Collection, but that might work for you. You could display him behind some of the other Superman villains. Maybe I'll pick some of these up myself. Let me know if you'd like to see me review some of these. I'm not as big a fan of the Chess Collection, but it still might be fun. Anyway, please stay tuned for the next video, which I'll post very soon. It's going to be the top 10 superheroes I wish had been included in the DC Comics collection, and I hope you enjoyed this. And then, of course, we'll do the top 10 special editions after that one. As always, I have been your host, the Monkey Boy, aka J to his friends. Thanks for watching.